joining us again. We try to get him in every month or so, kind of update what's going on with I should introduce him. He's actually the managing partner of Executive Search Partners, and he's a former CIO himself. And so they're techie folks. They're looking for techie folks, and in this case, very senior techie folks. So what's the situation on that? I mean, you hear all this talk about, there's a gazillion jobs out there. You can take your pick, but I don't suspect at the level that you're looking, that's the situation, right?
It's an interesting marketplace. So every year there's cycles. Christmas time, things slow down, don't pick up, and there's budget season. Things don't pick up until February or March. Goes to the beginning of the summer slows down, and then starts picking up at the beginning of September. So we've seen the summer slow down. What we don't, and every year it happens, and we can predict that. I can show you graph after graph going back to 2005, having been in this business that long. And the other thing, though, that's affecting the job market right now is the uncertainty of things like inflation and jobs and the stock market. And if you're a CFO, you're playing it pretty cautious, and you're probably saying, let's go a little bit slow on our hiring plan. So we don't know what the September pickup will be like. So right now, from our perspective, the market for senior level IT people is a little slow.
Okay. Well, there's still help wanted signs all over the place, but I would imagine not at that level, right? So, but what I was curious about is have you seen any change in the requirements for senior level IT? What are the people doing the hiring looking for these days, and how's that changed in say the past year or two?
Yeah, it's interesting. From the pandemic, a lot of companies had to do significant shifting to more online and more customer engagement, more remote access in a lot of different ways, both employees and for customers. And what that made companies aware of is how important IT was to their business. I mean, IT allowed companies to survive because it allowed employees to keep their jobs because they could work remotely without getting sick. It allowed them to engage customers and continue selling to clients, although they were remote. So IT all of a sudden has become important. And I just read a study recently, and I'm going to quote it here on my left. It says, the study was recently, how much do you expect your organization to change permanently compared to how it was operating before the pandemic? Only 7% of the companies said no change.
Wow.
60%. This is a huge number. Biden and other people would like to have that kind of favorability rating. 60% said that they think of significant change coming down the road. So what that has done is, for the senior IT leader, they need to be much more of a business person. They need to understand what the business is. They need to understand how IT can impact the business, should impact the business, ought to be impacting the business, and they ought to be having better influence with the senior level executives on how that is happening. And I think that's happening, which changes the demand for IT people, but IT people also need to be really, really good at technology. And there's a whole bunch of new technology stuff that's impacting the business.
So what's really standing out? I mean, obviously you're still kind of coming out of your slow period, but I imagine you still have some folks you're looking for in certain categories. Or what do you anticipate will be those certain categories this fall?
Well, I think our business is primarily senior level IT people, and recently we've taken on a number of senior level finance positions. As it turns out, we understand that environment fairly well. We're seeing continuing demand for people. We just picked up a new VP of finance for a $1 billion company that we've just started a search on. When people are looking for IT people, as I mentioned earlier, they're looking for IT people with a real understanding of two things. Their understanding of that IT can affect the business, and then what are the kind of things that IT can be doing to affect the business. And I think that a lot of people have been using the word digitization as, how do I digitize my business? And who knows what that is? I mean, there's a lot of definitions.
Yeah. Matt?
So what does it mean to you? digitizing a business?
Well, digitizing a business is the process of using all sorts of computer-based capabilities and technologies to improve your relationship with customers, to improve your products, to improve how you operate internally, to improve how you run the factory. If you think about companies today, and this is really a good exercise, think about any company that you know. How many of those companies are running today without a high dependency on computers? The answer is none. If you look at the best companies in that particular segment, no matter what it is, ask them what technologies they're using, what are the new things they're implementing. Perhaps a really good example of that, if you take the auto industry, or digitizing products, putting intelligence in products and linking it back to corporate. So you get statistics on who's using your products, you get information on service on a car, for example. You can download new software updates. What does it take in a company to do that kind of digitization? It goes all the way from designing products that can communicate and can accept those kind of updates and send information in, to having systems within the organization that support the right reception, analysis, and acting on the kind of information that you're getting from those kind of products. So that's a good example of digitization.
Let me ask you, there's been a move afoot, I don't know if you're seeing it, but in a lot of other areas, for fractional this and fractional that. Because then, for instance, when you hire somebody for a company, you're talking about big bucks with salary and benefits and stock options and all the other jazz. Have you guys taken a look at doing any fractional employment where somebody says, gosh, I only need this guy for 20 hours a week. What can you do for me?
We don't. Two comments. One, I think the fractional employment is companies are increasing the use of people on a fractional basis, but generally they don't really, unless there's a temporary change going on in the company, they need some sort of person in transition. A temporary CIO kind of job is that people are bringing in CIO level people to advise them on specific implementations, but not in what we've seen, not necessarily to run the IT organization. So.
Yeah, I expect if you got $1 billion company, you're going to be working 80-hour weeks anyway, right? So,
the other thing we're finding is that companies are a little, you're not working that hard, you're working smarter. And if you're working, in my personal opinion, if you're working 8 hours a week, you're not really doing the job. You ought to be able to delegate, you ought to have a plan, you ought to be able to communicate it, you ought to be able to sit back and relax so that you can think of new stuff when you show up the next Monday.
Okay. A call for work-life balance among CIOs from Mr. Erickson. Good for him. I did want to ask you, okay, I've got a business, I want to digitize it, or I want to, make it, more modern. What are some of the emerging technologies that IT people are using to do this, to digitize a business?
Well, let's take, first off, you got to have a core, which is the basic, people call it ERP systems, payables and order to cash is a lot of things. You bring an order in and you ship that information to manufacturing and they pack it and ship it out, and then you bill for it. And then there's the service back in. That's sort of basic ERP systems. What people are doing on top of that, though, the big word these days is analytics. Getting data from your customers, getting data from your manufacturing line, getting data from product service that's going on, and using that data to drive informed decisions. It's sort of like, what was what they call Billy Ball or something, Oakland Athletics, where they started using
where he used the statistics to pick up players that everybody else was going, so.
Yeah, and so data-driven decision-making has become really big, and McKinsey just recently projected that by 2025, almost all companies are going to drive all their decisions off of analytics. I think that's a little optimistic, but they're a pretty smart company and they see a lot of things. But analytics about what data you have, how do you organize it, how do you access it, how do you interpret it, that's a big thing. And then the other thing that people are doing is they're doing a lot of things relative to automating processes that perhaps they haven't automated before. And there's a term called robotic process automation, RPA. That's become pretty big out there. And I could go through a lot of other things. A couple of the big words that people are talking about is metaverse. Have you guys heard that word?
Everywhere. I've heard that word everywhere. Yes. I'm not even sure what it means because everyone's using it now, right?
Well, it's one of those, it's depending on who you talk to, it's it's defined differently, but it's basically augmenting your own, as I understand it, augmenting your own personal experiences by the addition of computers. And, of course, we do that already. We use computers to help us navigate somewhere. We use computers to interpret, if we're overseas, to interpret some other languages. People are talking about wearing glasses and virtual reality. And so the metaverse is sort of an expansion of the computers to enhance and expand and take over things in our life. The other area, Matt, that you asked about, the people are talking about, there's a big area called manufacturing 4.0, or
Industry 4.0, actually.
Industry 4.0, yeah.
Yeah, I know something a little bit about that, don't we, Gary? So we can't talk about that. It's a private thing. So
yeah. Well, I think that it's really an important, significant initiative. There's a whole plan that people have out there about the intelligent factory, factory 4.0, whatever you want to call it, and industry 4.0, a lot of effort around those particular areas. And people are integrating new technology, including Internet of Things and cloud and analytics and AI and machine learning into the production facilities and into their products, and then using that data to drive production, using that data to drive development of new products. And
agile manufacturing too. I mean, they want to get the car from being a 48-month car down to a maybe 12. I think that's a little optimistic, but 24 maybe, so we'll go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think if you were to go back to the 50s, where every year we were changing car designs, that was a lot of fun,
Once the edge trays got full, you had to get rid of it, right? So
that's right, exactly. Well, you had fins one year and flat things the next year and longer cars the next year after that.
Yeah.
If I could put in a bit of a plug for my employer, Lawrence Tech, we have something there called the Centropolis Accelerator, which is a business incubator for manufacturing. And we are working with Automation Alley on an Industry 4.0 accelerator to give birth to new firms that are working on these technologies, Industry 4.0 technologies. One of the ones that's really interesting is we have a new robotic production line at Lawrence Tech that we're teaching our engineering students on, and it's got KUKA robots and conveyor belt and all that good stuff, and it's all computer controlled. And there is an exact model of it living online. So a student can program an assembly line to do pick and pack or manufacturing operations or other things, and do it all virtually and spot the problems, in the computer before he actually tries to do anything with the actual robots. So and I think that's the kind of stuff that they're talking about. So
that's really cool. And I think that may be a version of digital twin, which is another one of those terms that people are talking about out there. There's a lot of new terms out there, and going back to my original point, anybody who's leading IT has got to understand, all of these technologies, right? And how they impact the business and how do you apply them. So a really good IT person is a good business person and also a geek.
All right. We're going to have to leave it at that, Gary. How do folks reach out to you to find out about all those cool IT jobs?
Well, you can go to our website, execsearchpartners.com, and you can see, how to contact all of the partners in execsearchpartners.com.